Hi there. Welcome to the Schwowin's Nest. My name is Sandra, and I'm so glad you're here. This project is starting out with an old book. I'm going to cut out some of the pages. And while this isn't exactly inspired by Instagram, it is inspired by just using rustic and natural materials to create spring and Easter projects. So I'm just taking my box cutter. I'm going to cut down really heavily and then just peel off some of the pages. I think I used about 30 pages for this. I cut out a shape that is half of a carrot with some cardboard, and now I'm going to just fold a bunch of these sheets in half. I think I did about 5 at a time, and I'm going to trace out the half carrot onto there, and then of course I'm just going to cut it out and it's going to create a whole size carrot. For those of you who have been watching me faithfully, you'll remember that I keep forgetting to pick up glue sticks, but I finally remembered the last time I was at the Dollar Tree. I'm going to glue the sides together. So glue on one side and then press it together, and then just continue on until I have all of these pieces glued together. It sort of ends up in a bit of a stack. After I had about 10 sheets glued together, I set those aside and then started with a new one. And then I'm going to glue those together. I just found that it was getting a little too thick. These are my last two stacks. So again, just the glue stick to make sure that it's really covered well, because I'm putting a thicker stack on instead of just one sheet of paper. And I'll just hold it together and press it down and make sure that it's really stuck. Then put glue on the last page and then open it up and glue the first page to the last page, and you've got a really pretty fluffy carrot. I tied some greenery together and there is a little bit of a hole in the center, so I'm going to just take that and pop it in with some hot glue and kind of squish it together so it all stays in place. Just with these two little stems here, and I do have some twine hanging down. I made myself a little twine ribbon. I'm going to add that to this and then it's done. I think it turned out super cute. For this project, I'm going to be using this wood panel that I've had. I've repurposed it many times and I'm going to do it one more time. And it's probably going to get something down the road again. Just using the glue stick, I'm taking a piece of the book pages and I'm going to glue that right in the center. Now, I trimmed mine down on the sides and I shouldn't have. So if you're going to do this project, make sure that you cover everything on the bottom. If it would have just been a natural wood color, or if I would have painted it white or a creamy white, I wouldn't have had to worry about that. But you end up seeing some of that at the end, and I'll show you what I do to fix it. Anyway, let's just glue this guy down and then get to the next step. I didn't want to throw out all of these cut carrot book pages, so I'm going to do something with this one. I'm using some burnt umber and I'm just getting some of the excess off, and I'm going to just very lightly start dry brushing on the page. Now, I did end up getting a big blob in one area, and you'll see that in a second. So there it is. So I had to go a little bit darker, but that's okay because it turned out really nice even with the dark. You still see some of the text coming through, and that was my idea for this anyway. Now I'm going to use the glue stick and just put it around the outside edges where the paper is going to be stuck down. So I'll just take the book page then and place it right on top, and you get this beautiful outline of a rustic carrot. And I was so excited when I laid this down. It just looks so pretty. You could also do this with orange if you wanted to, or any other color to create the carrot that you want to have on your sign. Instead of using greenery, I decided to grab these little twigs that I have left over, and I'm going to just glue them and make that sort of spray at the top of the carrot. So cute. I really like how this is turning out. I've got some more branches and I've just kind of cut them down to the sizes that I want, a longer one and a shorter one, and I'm going to decorate the bottom corner of this frame. Now, I love how it looks just like this, but you guys know me, I've got to add all my tiny little details. So I'm taking a little chunk of Spanish moss, and I decided here that the chunk I had was still too big. I'm just going to crumple it up and hot glue it to the bottom of the little sticks there where they meet the carrot. I'm going to do the same thing with the other little hunk of Spanish moss, and I'm going to put that into the left corner on top of the sticks. Finally, I did decide to add a little bit of greenery, just a few leaves in the bottom corner and a couple on the top of the carrot. These are something that I got at the Dollar Tree. They're from the little blueberry picks, and the colors are really dark and muted. I didn't want any bright greenery on this because I wanted to keep with more of the rustic look. It's probably difficult for you to notice, but I am still seeing some of that dark paint coming through on the sides because I cut my bottom sheet of book page too short. So I'm adding some strips of book pages that I cut down straight on one side and then tore on the other, just enough to cover it up. And I just think it adds a little something extra to this project. This DIY is definitely an inspired from Instagram. They had done this in with a much larger wood slice. I only had these smaller ones. I did get these from Amazon a couple of years ago, and I will have some in my Amazon store if you're interested in getting some. But most of the time, I get my wood slices from my cottage, and I get my hubby to just cut them down for me. I'm going to be creating 4 holes using a small drill bit, north, south, east, and west. I have 4 twigs that are about the same length and the same size in the width. So I'm just using a bit of hot glue and I'm just going to push them down into the holes. I do have a piece of parchment paper underneath just in case the hot glue goes all the way through. You can see that this first twig is naturally bending in towards the center. So I'm going to make sure that they all do that because that's exactly what I want them to do. I'm going to add some twine where all of the twigs naturally come together, and then I'll trim off any of the excess branches at the top. Since the 2 twine tails were hanging down, I kind of glued them in such a way onto the branches that they kind of looked like they were naturally cascading. And then I decided to add 2 more so there would be 4 pieces hanging down. I'm adding a tiny little ball of Spanish moss to the very top, and I'm going to accent that with a tiny little flower. I did the same thing on the one corner at the very bottom, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to put in the center of this, but then I just kind of looked around my craft room and decided to grab some of these rubber leaves that I've had, and I'm just going to put them in sort of a semicircle towards the one angle. I'm going to add a magnolia flower into it, and I think this is just so simple, rustic, and really pretty. I hope you like this project. Let me know if you think you might try this too. I got these rubber tree stems from Michael's last year when they were on clearance, and they just look so pretty. I know they're not the right shape for magnolia flowers, but I thought because they were so nice and thick, they would fit just perfect. I've seen magnolia blossoms at dollar stores, so be on the lookout for those when you're out shopping. For my first Timber Tuesday project, I'm using this wood birdhouse cutout. Now, I did cut this out using my laser machine, but I'm sure you can find these at craft stores or at the dollar store, or you can even take a Dollar Tree sign that is square or round and cut out this shape. I'm using this pre-made stain that I always have in a bottle. It's just a combination of water and acrylic paint in burnt umber, a little bit of gray, and some black. I'm simply going to apply the stain, brush it in with the paintbrush, and then wipe off the excess with a paper towel. Once it's completely dry, I'll use hot glue and some of this reindeer moss that I get at the Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to do the roof outline. I'm not going to go further down. I just wanted it to look like there has been a whole bunch of moss growing on the roof of this birdhouse. Don't forget when you're using hot glue and florals like this, sometimes the glue will come through. So I did have to grab my little silicone spatula here because I did burn myself a couple of times. Once I was complete, I just tapped off some of the excess because there's always some loose stuff. And you can see here that I got smart this time when I was using the moss and I put a piece of paper down to catch everything. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a haircut because I just don't want it too scraggly looking. And then I'll tap off some of the excess again. Here's a little tip for you when you're using reindeer moss or Spanish moss. Take some hairspray and give it a couple of good coats. That will act like a glue and it'll keep all of the little bits and pieces stuck. I decided that I wanted my little birdhouse to have a little dowel, a little perch for my bird. So I'm just using one of these little dowel pins, and I think I got these in a pack from the Dollar Tree a while back. They do come in handy for little projects. So if you see them, grab them because they're just a little fun piece that you can use for all sorts of things when you're crafting. I'm going to take the same stain and give it a light coat. But everything that I'm using, if you can't find it at the dollar stores or Walmart or Hobby Lobby, it will be listed in my Amazon store. So make sure you head down to the link in my description box. Check out my Amazon store for all of the supplies that you see me using in my videos. I purchased a 15-foot grapevine garland, and that's what this is. And I really love it because the twigs on this garland are really thin and it makes for a really beautiful, delicate wreath. So I cut a piece and I glued it together, and now I'm just going to be gluing it right on top of my birdhouse. Using hot glue again, this time I'm taking some Spanish moss and I'm just going to squish it down on the bottom of my little wreath form. So again, use the silicone spatula because I end up getting the Spanish moss stuck to my fingers and I just never learn. It's sitting right there. You can see it, but I just don't have the wherewithal to pick it up and use it. I had a little extra piece of the garland, so I just kind of stuck it on to the bottom so it looks like it has a little bit of a ledge. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I hope you can see what I'm doing. Now it's time to add some florals, a little bit of greenery, and I'm going to add one of these little chunky birds that I used in my last video when I did my spring mantle makeover. If you haven't seen that video, it is definitely worth the watch. So I'm adding some of these solo wood flowers. They are the rustic ones that still have a little bit of the bark on them. They're called skin flowers and they're beautiful. I love using solo wood flowers. What I'm doing here is just adding some little bits of scrap wood to make a little bit of a raised platform so I can glue the bird on. If I didn't do that, it was probably going to fall in towards the center because it would only be attached to the little grapevine wreath on the side and by its tail. If you notice at the top, I did add a jute rope hanger. I did that before I started adding all of the embellishments. And now I'm just going to let some music play and you can watch me very quickly put all of this together. I'm really pleased with how this project turned out. This project is using some of these plastics eggs. I got a dozen of them at my dollar store for $3, just about the same price of what we're paying for real eggs. So that's kind of scary. But anyway, I'm using one of these little pokey tools from the Dollar Tree and I'm just poking all the way through. I'm not going in a straight line. I want it to be a little jagged and ragged. And as I go around, I'm going to be able to then meet up with the pokes that I started off with and very easily just take a pair of scissors, cut in just a few of the little spaces, and I'll be able to just pop that lid right off. Here it is one more time, a little bit quicker, but giving you the same idea. These scoring tools from the Dollar Tree are fantastic. I pick them up a lot, usually once every 3 or 4 months. I go through them quite often. They're not the best quality, but they really do a good job of piercing through harder plastics. I dug around in my stash and I found this small little canister, and it's the perfect size for what I was looking for. I'm going to be taking the eggs and hot gluing them to the very bottom of the jar, and I'm going to go all the way around. This was something that I saw on Instagram and I just fell in love with it. I had to recreate it for myself. Now, I do have a little bit of a different take on it. I'll show you the picture here in a second from what I was looking at. They had it with some real flowers. I'm going to be using artificial, but that's okay. Now, when you're doing the second and the rest of the eggs, make sure you add a little bit of glue so the two eggs will also hold together. I grabbed this large wood slice that I have in my stash and a big blob of Spanish moss, and I'm just going to set the eggs in the jar just right on top of it. I'm not going to glue anything down because I want to be able to use some of this later on. That wood slice is like gold to me, so I like to use it for different projects. In order to hide the rings that show that it has a screw on top, which it does because it's a canister, I'm going to take some of the Dollar Tree twine and I'm going to knot it first. I'm going to leave that long piece hanging because then I'm going to be able to tie it off later. And I'm going to just wrap it around as many times as feel it's necessary to hide all of those rings. So it's going to be fairly thick. I will use some hot glue along the way just to make sure that the twine stays put. And once I get to the end, I'm going to use that extra piece of twine that I didn't cut off to tie it off in a knot, and then you don't even see any of the strands. In keeping with the rustic theme, I'm adding some little twigs into the eggshells. Then I'm going to add some greenery, some florals, and on the inside of the jar, I grabbed a little stump that I had. I glued that to the bottom of the jar and then added some reindeer moss around the outside of it. And I'm going to be adding something a little different to the inside of the jar. So you'll have to stay tuned to see what I do. In my last video, I made a really sweet little twiggy magnolia tree, and I made another one, and this one I'm going to be just gluing right on top of that stump inside the jar, and I think this turned out super cute. I am so in love with it. I'm really happy and pleased with this one too. If you've been with me for a while, you know I like to repurpose things. This was a crate that I had used for a different project, and now I'm going to make it over. I'm using some chalk paint, and it's called clay. I think it's very similar to the mineral in the Waverly, sort of dirt color, I guess, or maybe like a potting clay kind of color. So mix between a gray and a brown. I'm going to give it a heavy dry brushing all the way around, and then I'm going to do the same thing with some burnt umber just in an acrylic paint. I took some plastic eggs that have styrofoam on the inside and I cut them in half. And then I'm taking a piece of tissue paper and I crumpled it up. Now I'm just going to hot glue it right onto the egg itself. Now, this is, like I said, a half an egg, and I'm trying to create the look of those bulbs that you see in the daffodils and the paper whites and that kind of thing sticking out of the ground a little bit. I'm going to keep folding and gluing until I have all of the edges and the points of the tissue paper right on the little half egg. And as you can see here, I'm just kind of squishing it to give it some wrinkles and keep it all in place. The wrinkles in the tissue paper are going to sort of mimic what a bulb looks like, but they're never white. So I'm taking some of my little pre-made stain color and I'm just going to dab it on and give these sort of a brown color. You could do different colors. I know some bulbs are more of maybe like an orangey brown color. So it really depends on the look you're going for. I just liked the brown because it blended really well with the box. I'm taking some long greenery stems and I'm going to create this little bulb with the green leaves sticking out of it. These stems have some really narrow areas at the top. I'm also pulling off the yellow because I don't need that. And then I'm going to trim off the really skinny parts at the top and round it just a little bit so it looks more like either some narcissus or daffodil leaves, you know, all of those ones for the spring that are really long and narrow. Using this little piercing tool from the Dollar Tree again, I'm going to poke through the tissue paper, through the plastic, and then just wiggle it around and make a bigger hole so I can push the stem in. And then I'm going to push all of the actual greens right down to the bottom so they look like they're sticking right out. I'm going to do 2 for each of these.
I filled the box with some styrofoam and then used some hot glue to glue the bulbs in a row. I also added some little white flowers. These were from a dogwood branch, but they're very similar to some paper whites or other little white spring flowers like a crocus. So I thought they would work just fine. I used two per bulb. And then I went and grabbed some real dirt from one of my pots that's sitting right outside my side door, and I'm just going to fill it in. Since this box had holes as handles on the side, I decided to take some burlap ribbon. This has a little bit of a black stripe, almost like a ticking stripe in it. So I used that all the way around the top to cover up the handles, but then I decided that I needed to put it at the bottom just to make it look more finished. I really like how this one turned out, and it's something I've never done before. I think it's really neat how I created it. And let me know if you might create something like this for your home. For this project, I'm using this little terracotta pot that I got at the thrift store, and I took some of that grapevine garland again and created an egg shape. I just cut it and then I put it together at the top and hot glued it. Now, to put the grapevine wreath and make it stand up into the pot, I'm going to be using just a couple of pieces of wire, and I'm going to bend them into a U shape, make them into a floral pick, and then I'm just going to press it down. Then I'll add some hot glue on top and just wait for it to dry. Next, I'm taking some of this eucalyptus and I cut them down into just like one or two little pieces. I'm going to grab some hot glue and I'm going to just push it right onto the styrofoam. I don't want anything hanging out. I wanted it to be really flat so you could still see some of the wreath bottom. I do want to make sure, though, that I cover all of the styrofoam and you can't see any of it. I've grabbed a little bunch of Spanish moss and I'm just kind of going to wrinkle it into a little bit of a circle. And then I'll add a bunch of hot glue and stick that in. This is going to become the base of a little nest. I also had some little bits of twig left over, so I'm just going to add that into the Spanish moss and just give it a more realistic nest look. At first, I had some wooden eggs and I thought I would just put one in there, but then I didn't like the wood color and I didn't feel like painting them. So I went into my stash and I grabbed this little mint green egg and I gave it a few little white speckles and just popped him right into the nest. What I'm doing now, though, is I'm creating a little really full bow. So I did take some twine, I wrapped it around both my fingers, and now I'm just going to tie it off in the center so it creates a bow. Then I'm just going to take it and really pull it apart, make it sort of fluffy and have a lot of the twine sort of coming apart so it looks really messy. And then I'm just going to glue it on top of the wreath right at the point. I'm going to start today's projects with what I'm calling my birdhouse trio. I've got this large birdhouse that I'm going to start off with. I printed off this cute little pattern from Pixabay.com and I put it on some cardstock. I'm just going to cut it out and then using my glue stick, I'm going to attach it to the roof of the house. I'm going to be using 2 sheets of this paper, one on one side and one on the other. I just trimmed off the excess paper and then let it dry. The red and black buffalo check is gift wrap paper, so I'm just going to leave that on. It has some wrinkles in it, but I'm okay with all of that rustic look. I'm going to paint it with a couple of coats of chalk paint in the color sheepskin. It's a nice creamy white color. For the base of the birdhouse, I mixed 2 colors together, some navy blue and some eucalyptus green. I wanted to try and match that blue color as best I could on the top. And this is what I'm going to use to paint all the bases of the birdhouse, and that will just help them blend in and look like they belong together. I also painted the inside wood area as you see me doing here, and I made sure that I kind of pushed my brush a little bit to the outside and made the blue spill over to the front of the birdhouses. I'm using an emery board just to get off any of the excess paper that is on these birdhouses. And you can see that I have already painted the bases blue on these 2 little ones. This one has a pretty green, blue, and yellow plaid on the roof, and the other one has a pretty white and blue plaid. So as this birdhouse was drying, it started to crackle with the paint. And I thought, you know what? Let's go with that theme. So I'm going to be painting the 2 smaller birdhouses with a darker gray finish first. And then I'm going to use a crackle medium that I've had in my stash for years and years and years. I used to do ceramic pots probably 25 years ago, and I used to do a crackle technique on them then, and it's just so funny how things turn around and come back in style. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to both of these. I'm going to paint one of them in a light gray and the other one in white. If you're not sure how a crackle medium works, what you do is paint your base coat, let it dry, then you put on a coat of the crackle medium, and you can do it thin or thick depending on how thick you want the cracks. Then you're going to let that dry completely, and then you're going to add your top coat. And what you want to make sure with your top coat is that you don't go over it too many times. The thicker you put your top coat on, the bigger the cracks you're going to get. I decided to use this old piece of deck board as the base for my birdhouse trio, and I'm just going to use some hot glue to glue all 3 of my birdhouses on there. I'm going to center the large one, and then I'm going to push the 2 smaller ones right up against the sides of the big one, and that's going to make the roofs kind of overlap. I just thought that looked kind of quirky and fun. Using some white chalk paint and a chip brush, I'm just going to go and give this a really rough coat on the deck board. And the reason I didn't paint it first is because I wanted to make sure that my birdhouses would stick really well to the wood. So wood on wood is much better hold than wood on paint. I'm going to decorate the birdhouse with some of these little wood cutout birds that I get from a local dollar store and some solo wood flowers. I really love using solo wood flowers. I'm almost out of them, so I'm going to have to place another order. But if you're interested in looking at and seeing what type of flowers are available, check out the link for solo wood flowers down in my description box. Once I had all the florals the way I liked them, I felt like the birdhouses needed a little something on the top. So when the last time I was at Dollar Tree, I found these little wooden eggs. They are absolutely adorable. And I'm going to glue one of them on each of the small houses. And then I have some larger wooden eggs that I'm going to glue just one on the top of the large birdhouse. I'll add a little bit more Spanish moss to those and a couple of little greenery stems. And this project is absolutely adorable and complete. I'd like to give a quick thank you to all of my current subscribers. I really appreciate your support. If you're new to my channel and you like what you see, I'd love it if you could hit that red button too. A couple of weeks ago, I ventured out to the thrift stores again and I found a couple of sweet watering cans. They're so cute, but the colors just aren't my style. The first thing I always do is spray with Matte Clear Finish by Rust-Oleum, and that just takes away some of the shine and helps my chalk paint stick better. For this one, I'm going to give it a couple of coats of white chalk paint, and I did have to go over the navy blue areas a little bit more with a heavier hand, but that's okay. If you don't like the brush strokes on your projects, you can definitely just take them outside and give them a couple of coats of spray paint. This is the second little watering can. It has some strawberries on the front and just some greenery in the back. And all of those raised edges are going to look absolutely amazing once you start to distress these pieces. This one, I'm going to give a couple of coats of this sage green chalk paint. I just love this color for spring. I decided to distress this green one with a little bit of white paint. I don't have a lot of paint on my brush and I'm using a very light touch, but look at how the details pop from all of those raised surfaces on this watering can. I really love that detail on the top and the chalk paint just brings it out beautifully. For the white one, I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm using a color called Mushroom. It's one of my favorite paints, sort of like a crockery color. And again, it's just going to bring out all of the details of those beautiful raised edges. I'm just using, again, a dry brush technique, and I'll just go over it as many times as I want to until I get the look desired. I love raising things up to make them look a little bit more expensive and high end. So I found this leftover spindle in my stash, and I'm just going to take that mushroom paint and give it a couple of coats. I don't need it to be totally covered because I really like that rustic distressed look. I grabbed one of these glass candlesticks that you can get at the Dollar Tree, and I gave it a couple of coats of white paint too. This is what I'm going to use for the green watering can. To give both of these pieces a permanent hold, I'm using Gorilla Glue Clear Grip and some hot glue, and I'll just glue the two pieces together. And I think both of these turned out absolutely gorgeous. I added some florals, and for the one, I even added a little spade and a mini fork, and I think they're super cute.
I'm going to repurpose this frame that I used for a Christmas project, taking out the back and just giving the frame another coat of white paint. It already has white on it, but it has a little bit of brown distressing. I'd like to just cover that up and make it fresh. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that I have a wood laser cutting machine, and I designed this frame with these four little birds. They're just regular natural wood, and I'm just giving it a stain. Now, I thought this stain would be more of a darker color, but I added too much of burnt umber, so it looks a little reddish, but I'm going to go with it because I think it matches the design perfectly. At the end, it was great. I'm just taking a paper towel and just wiping off the excess, and I'll continue to stain the whole thing. This is the frame backing, and you can see that there's some extra paper down at the bottom there. It ripped off when I tried to pull off what was already on there. So what I've decided to do, just to make this more of a white background, is just to add a couple of pieces of printer paper. I didn't want to paint this because cardboard always warps when you paint it. It gets all bubbly, and I didn't want that to happen. So I don't have a glue stick, and I thought I would just try some of this school glue. It's very wet. It makes the paper wrinkly, but you won't see that because this is just a backing. I created this background sheet on Google Drawings and I used a wood grain background and then some magnolias that I got from Creative Fabrica. If you've never visited Creative Fabrica before, you need to. They have gorgeous, beautiful graphics that you can use. If you would print these off on tissue paper, you could decoupage them onto all sorts of different projects. It's just an amazing site. There are so many talented artists on there. I do have a referral link for you down in my description box, which means I'm an affiliate for that. If you're not sure what an affiliate is, it means I get a percentage of what you spend on there, but it doesn't increase your price. Okay, so this is not sponsored by Creative Fabrica by any means. I just love having the ability to go there whenever I'm looking for beautiful designs and then I just grab them. So what I'm going to do is I printed this off on two pieces of printer paper, one for one side, one for the other side, and now I'm just going to fit it onto my backing sheet. If you'd rather not spend the time creating something like this, I have this piece on my Etsy shop. The frame is dry. I've put the glass back in, and this is sort of a frosted glass. And now I'm just going to simply put the backing in, and then I can flip it over and get ready for the next step. Take a look at this print. I think it's absolutely gorgeous, even just by itself in this frame. But I'm going to take these birds and I'm going to use hot glue and just place it right on top of the glass. This way I can repurpose this frame again for something else down the road. I can take out the backing, replace the paper, just pop off the birds really gently because it's really easy to get hot glue off of glass. And I'm just so excited about how this turned out. And I think it has to be my favorite this time around. But I always say that, and then I always like something else better. But for now, this is my favorite. You'll have to let me know what you think of this one. This is another repurposing project. I had made this sign many years ago. I think it was one of the first things that I created with my YouTube channel, but I don't even remember if I have it on here. Anyway, these are just some of the window clings that you can get from the Dollar Tree. I think they were, or they were stickers. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and pull all of these off because I have a different idea for this sign. This is a project that was inspired by something that I saw online. I don't know where I saw it, and I could probably try and find it again, but eh, you can just see what I'm doing here. So on the pieces of paper right next to it to the left, you can see that I've sketched out somewhat of a bunny shape, and this is what I want to do. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm just taking that bunny shape that I've already did on the paper, and I'm just recreating it better on my sign, just in pencil. Pencil is the best thing to use because you can easily erase it, even off of paint. I'm going to be using this gray and white variegated twine to outline my bunny shape on here. And I'm just going to use hot glue to put it on. Now, my hot glue gun was giving me a little bit of an issue here. So I think it's on its last legs. I may have to break out my new one that I have. Now, not to worry, if you're not a good artist or you don't think that you can draw a bunny, you can definitely just print off an outline on a couple of pieces of printer paper and then use the pencil method or some graphite paper to trace the image onto your sign. This is a fairly big sign, so my bunny is pretty big, and I would have had to use two pieces of printer paper, but if you're doing something smaller, then by all means, just do it that way. Do it however it works for you. If you noticed, I did cut a piece already, so I'm not concerned about using the twine all in one piece for this. It really doesn't matter because you can't tell if you've cut a piece here and there anyway. But I love the shape of this bunny, and the nose, I think it's absolutely adorable. You'll have to let me know if you would try something like this and if you would do something different. I left the colors and the stripes on the background of it. I just thought it was a perfect complement to the gray and white twine, but I think this would be really sweet even if you would maybe darken up the bunny shape itself, but I like the way it's just popping right off of the board. This project turned out super cute. Would I do it again? Probably not. It was a little bit more work than I thought it was going to be. But I've got these two plastic eggs. One is a really large one, and that stands on its own. What I'm doing here is just adding a little cardboard disc to the bottom of this one that doesn't have a flat bottom. So that way I can just get it to stand up on its own. I am, however, going to add some rocks down into the bottom of the eggs just to make sure that they have a little bit of weight at the bottom and they don't tip over. My initial thought was to do a paint technique on these, and I wasn't sure if the yellow was going to show through. So I ended up just taking them outside and giving them a really quick coat of black spray paint just to make them all even. This one didn't have any designs on it, but the small one had a bunny face on it, and it actually didn't even get any spray paint on it. So that was sort of a bust. So you don't have to do this step. I'm going to just give them all one coat of my DIY chalk paint, and you can use any type of paint for this because I'm going to use the baking soda technique to create some texture on them for the additional coats. After the one coat was dry, I added some paint into a small little cup. I ended up mixing way too much, so always start out with a little bit less paint than you actually need. But because this has texture in it and it kind of makes it look a little bit like chalk paint too, the excess I'm just going to dump right back into my white jar of paint. So I'm adding some baking soda. I'm going to mix it up. It's going to get really thick and it's going to look super dry like right now, but then it's going to all blend in. I used quite a bit of baking soda because I wanted this to have really good coverage too, along with the texture. I applied two coats of the baking soda mixture, and that covered everything perfectly. Now, one thing that you need to remember if you're using eggs that come apart, don't skip this step. Hot glue them together first. I didn't do that. I don't know why. I don't know what I was thinking, but the little one that opens on the sides, it did start to fall apart at one point. So you do see a little bit of the lines on these, but I'm okay with that. I just don't need them falling apart on me. Using some cereal box board, I'm going to draw some bunny ears. I'm going to do 4 large ones and 4 small ones. And the reason I'm doing 4 is I want the ears to be thicker, but I also want to put a piece of wire in between to make them bendable. If you're going to create this project, I would suggest not using 2 layers of cardboard. I think one would be fine with gluing the wire on it that way. I had a little bit of a hard time once I had all of my fabric on them and everything that they were difficult to bend. So the reason I used the cereal board is because it's more flexible, but then I ended up making it too stiff anyway. So I'm taking some wire and I'm bending it into the shape of the bunny ear, and then I'm going to just place it on top of the cardboard, add a whole bunch of hot glue, and then put the other piece of cardboard on top. Again, I don't think you need the extra cardboard on top. I think you would be fine just like this. But I literally just globbed a whole bunch of hot glue on there so it would hold the wire down onto the cardboard. I have this ivory chenille fabric that I'm going to use for the bunny ears. I'm going to trace out the bunny ear, but I'm going to cut about 1/4 of an inch larger for each one. That's just going to give me the ability to kind of fringe it on the end and make it fun. I can't stress this enough. When you are cutting out fabric, make sure you have a good pair of fabric scissors. Regular scissors are just going to tear up the fabric, especially if it's something thick like this with multiple strands and layers in it. It's going to make a mess. So use your fabric scissors. Make sure that's all you're using them for. You're not using them for paper or wire or anything like that because you will instantly ruin them. If you're looking for some fabric scissors to purchase, I have a bunch of them listed in my Amazon store under tools and hardware. The link to my store is in my description box. Next, I'll take the cardboard and some hot glue and then just glue it together and make a cardboard sandwich with the fabric. I'm not going to add too much glue to the fabric because you don't really need it. I'm also going to be gluing around the edges once I get both pieces attached, and then that will hold everything in place. To make the edges look a little bit frayed and fuzzy, I'm just using my hand and roughing up the edges. This chenille really loosens up some of the threads really easily, and any of them that are too long, I'm just going to trim down a bit. It just made the ears look a little bit more cute. To make these bunnies look even a little bit more cutesy or fun or whimsical, I'm going to add this little piece of pink fabric. It came from a little baby blanket at the dollar store. And I'm just going to glue on a little piece on each of the ears. I grabbed my rotary tool with the diamond cutting blade, and once I turn it on, I'm going to be cutting out some areas at the top of each of the eggs so I can slide in the bunny ears. Now, this proved to be a little bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be, and I did have to make thicker openings than I thought. However, I think it was worth the effort when you see the final result. You can see here how large the opening is, and this is the big egg. The small egg, because it had the openings on the side, it actually broke open, so I had to do a little bit of fixing there. So I'm just going to show you this one because it turned out right. The other thing I had to do with the ears was cut them down a little bit at the bottom. You might be able to notice that with the one that's just sitting there. And now I'm just going to slide it in and place it where I want it to be. I wanted these ears to kind of just be sticking straight up, but I ended up making them a little bit too wide. So if I needed to do this project over again, I would make much skinnier ears. For the final touch, I simply took a black marker and I did 2 little circles for eyes, a little circle for a nose, and then I made the 2 little sort of bunny lips or going out to their cheeks and a couple of little whiskers. And I think these turned out absolutely adorable. Would I make them again? I probably would. I might use a different technique for these, but I think they were worth the effort. You'll have to let me know what you think and if you might try making some bunnies like this. I hope you enjoyed these spring decor ideas and got some inspiration to start creating some of your own DIYs for your home. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. If you like this video, you might want to check out a couple more that I've got listed for you here. Bye for now.